The 1st of July, 1902, Volume 4. True victims must expose themselves to the pains of Jesus. Machinations against the Church and against the Pope. As I was in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, kneeling on an altar together with two more people. In the meantime, Jesus Christ appeared over this altar, and he said, "True victims must have communication with my very life. They must avail themselves of my very life and expose themselves to my very pains." While saying this, he took a pyx in his hand and gave communion to all three of us. After this, behind that altar, there seemed to be a door which led into a street filled with people and jam-packed with demons, in such a way that one could not walk without being squeezed by them. And since it was full of thorns extremely sharp, one could not make a movement without feeling one's flesh being pricked deep inside. At any cost, I would have wanted to escape those diabolical furies, and I almost tried to do it, but someone, I don't know who, prevented me by saying to me, "Everything you see are machinations against the Church and against the Pope. They would want the Pope to get out of Rome by invading the Vatican and seizing it. And if you want to avoid these bothers, men and demons will acquire strength and will make these thorns come out, which will prick the Church bitterly. But if you content yourself with suffering them, both the one and the other will be weakened." On hearing this, I stopped, but who can say what I went through and suffered? I thought I would never again get out from the midst of those diabolical spirits. However, after staying there almost one whole night, divine protection freed me. End of the reading. The 1st of July, 1907, Volume 8. In the divine will, one forgets about sins. I was reading about a female saint who would think constantly about her sins, asking God for sorrow and forgiveness. In my interior, I was saying, "Lord, what a difference between myself and this saint. I who do not think about sins, and she who always thinks about them. It shows how I got it wrong." In one instant, I felt him move in my interior. Something like a flash of light formed in my mind, and I heard him say, "Silly, silly that you are. Don't you want to understand this? When in the world has my will ever produced sins or imperfections? My will is always holy, and one who lives in my will is already sanctified and enjoys, nourishes herself with, and thinks of all that my will contains. And even though she has committed sins in the past, finding herself in the beauty, in the sanctity, in the immensity of goods that my will contains, she forgets the ugliness of her past and remembers only the present, unless she goes out of my will. Then, as she would return to her own being, it is no wonder that she remembers sins and miseries. Keep well in mind that these thoughts of sins and of oneself cannot enter my will, and if the soul feels them, it means that she is not stable and fixed within me, but she makes some exits. Then, finding myself in my usual state, I saw him for just a little, and he told me, "My daughter, as much as the truth is persecuted, one cannot help recognizing it as truth. And the time comes in which that very persecuted truth is recognized and loved. In these sad times, everything is falsehood and duplicity. And so that truth may have lordship, man deserves to be beaten and destroyed. Part of these blows they themselves will give to themselves and will destroy one another. Others will come from me, especially for France. There will be such a great mortality as to almost depopulate her." End of the reading. The 1st of July, 1923, volume 15, The Good and the Effect of Prayer in the Divine Will. Delight of Jesus in manifesting his truths to the creature. How God is ever new. I was fusing myself in the holy divine will in order to go around through each creature's intelligence and give to my Jesus the return of love of each thought of creature. But while I was doing this, a thought said to me, what is the good of praying in this way? On the contrary, it seems to me that this is nonsense rather than prayer. And my always lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, my daughter, do you want to know what the good and the effect of it is? When the creature comes to cast a little pebble of her will into the immense sea of my divinity, as she casts it, if her will wants to love, the infinite sea of the waters of my love ripple, are agitated, and I feel the waves of my love giving off their celestial fragrance, and I feel the pleasure, the joys of my love being agitated by the little pebble of the will of the creature. If she adores my sanctity, the little pebble of the humour will agitates the sea of my sanctity, and I feel cheered by the most pure auras of my sanctity. In sum, whatever the humour will wants to do in mine, it flings itself like a little pebble into each sea of my attributes, and as it agitates them and ripples them, I feel I'm given my own things, and the honours, the glory, the love which the creature can give me in a divine manner. It happens as to a person who is very rich and has all goods in his house, most fresh founts, fragrant founts, warm founts. Someone else enters into this house but has nothing to give to that person because he possesses everything. However, he wants to please him, he wants to love him, and what does he do? He takes a little pebble and casts it into the fresh fount. The waters being agitated give off a most delicate freshness, and the lord of that house enjoys the pleasure of the freshness of his own fount. He delights in the very goods he possesses. But why? Because the other one took the care of agitating that fount, since when things are stirred, they give off the fragrance, the freshness, or the heat they contain more intensely. This is what it means to enter into my will, to stir, to move my being, and to say to me, do you see how good, lovable, loving, holy, immense, powerful you are? You are everything, and I want to move the whole of you in order to love you and to give you pleasure. And do you think this is trivial? Having said this, he withdrew in my interior, and I was left thinking, how good Jesus is. It seems to me that he greatly delights in communicating himself to the creature, and he takes so much pleasure in manifesting his truths that while he is saying one, that very truth is a spur for him and almost pushes him with an irresistible force to manifest more truths. What goodness, what love. And Jesus came out again from within my interior, and placing his face close to mine, added, my daughter, you do not know what it means to manifest my truths, and this is why you marvel at my pleasure and at the irresistible force I feel to manifest myself to the creature. And one who is willing to listen to me forms my joy and my delights in conversing with her. You must know that when I manifest one truth of mine which is not yet known, it is a new creation that I make, and I love very much to release from myself the many goods and secrets which I contain. But as much as I may speak, since I am that act ever new which never repeats itself, I always desire to say more. And as I speak, I have always more new things which I would like to say, because that newness is never exhausted in me. I am always new in love, new in beauty, new in contentments, in harmonies, new in everything, and ever new. This is why I do not tire anyone. I have always new things to give and to say, and the irresistible force that pushes me to manifest myself is my love. In an outpouring of love, I issued the creation. Everything that can be seen in the whole universe was all inside of me. Love made the shadow of my light overflow from my interior, and I created the sun, the shadow of my immensity and of my harmonies, and I extended the heavens, harmonizing them with many stars and celestial spheres. These and other things which I created were nothing other than shadows of mine, which I released from myself. And my love had its outpouring, and I took great delight in seeing what was contained in me, spread out in little particles hovering over all creation. Now, what will be my joy in manifesting my truths, which are not shadows of mine that come out of me, but the substance of the goods I contain within me, and which speak of me, not in a mute language like all created things do, but with clear, sonorous, and eloquent voice, and which, since my word is creative, like a new creation, create in the soul the truths are manifest. If with one fiat I created many things, in manifesting my truths, it is not just one fiat that I pronounce, but as many words for as many as are needed, in order to manifest and to have souls comprehend that which I want them to understand. Imagine then what my contentment is in manifesting my truths to the soul, who not in a mute language, but with speaking voice, will manifest my goods, my truths to others, in order to infuse in the others the good she has received. Therefore, in manifesting my truths, my love finds its outpouring and becomes festive, and I greatly love one who is willing to listen to me. End of the reading. The 1st of July, 1924, Volume 17, Laments of the Soul, the Prayer of Jesus, how one who gives himself to God loses his rights. I felt very oppressed because of the privation of my adorable Jesus. Oh, how my heart bleeds as I feel subjected to suffer continuous deaths. I felt I could not go on without him, and that my martyrdom could not be harder than that. And while I was trying to follow Jesus in the different mysteries of his passion, I arrived at accompanying him in the mystery of his painful scourging. At that moment he moved in my interior, filling all of myself with his adorable person. Upon seeing him, I wanted to tell him of my hard state, but Jesus, imposing silence on me, told me, "My daughter, let us pray together. There are certain sad times in which my justice, unable to contain itself because of the evils of creatures, will want to flood the earth with new scourges, and so prayer in my will is necessary, which, extending over all, places itself as defence of the creatures, and with its power prevents my justice from approaching the creature to strike her." How beautiful and touching it was to hear Jesus pray. And since I was accompanying him in the sorrowful mystery of the scourging, he made himself seen pouring out blood, and I heard him say, "My Father, I offer you this blood of mine. Oh, please let it cover all the intelligences of creatures, rendering vain all their evil thoughts, dimming the fire of their passions, and making holy intelligences rise again. May this blood cover their eyes and be a veil to their sight, so that the taste of evil pleasures may not enter them through their eyes, and they may not get dirty with the mud of the earth. May this blood of mine cover and fill their mouths, and render their lips dead to blasphemies, to imprecations, to all of their bad words. My Father, may this blood of mine cover their hands and strike terror in man for so many evil actions. May this blood circulate in our eternal will in order to cover all, to defend all, and to be a defending weapon for the creature before the rights of our justice." But who can tell of the way Jesus prayed and of all that he said? Then he remained silent, and I felt in my interior as if Jesus was taking my little and poor soul in his hands, and he squeezed it, he touched it, he looked at it. And I said to him, My love, what are you doing? Is there anything in me that displeases you? And he, I am working and expanding your soul in my will. And then I do not need to give you an account of what I do, because since you gave yourself completely to me, you have lost your rights, rights which are already mine. Do you know what your only right is? That my will be yours and that it provides you with all that can make you happy in time and eternity. End of the reading. The 1st of July, 1926, volume 19. There is no sanctity without the will of God. The coming of Jesus upon earth served to form the ways and the stairs to reach the kingdom of his will. I was doing my usual acts in the Supreme Volition, and I thought to myself, how is it possible that among the many saints of the Old Testament who have so distinguished themselves with the power of miracles like Moses and Elijah and the many prophets, and among so many saints after the coming of our Lord, who have rendered themselves so marvellous because of their virtues and miracles, none of these has possessed the kingdom of the divine will and has lived in the unity of its light? It seems incredible. Now, while I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus came out from within my interior and clasping me to himself told me, my daughter, yet it is really true that until now no one has possessed the kingdom of my will or enjoyed all the fullness of the unity of the light it contains. Had it been so, since it is the thing that interests me the most, that glorifies me the most, and that no less will place all the divine rights in safety and will complete the work of creation and redemption, and not only this, but will bring to the creature the greatest good that can exist in heaven and on earth, I would have acted in such a way as to make it known, just as I have made known the many virtues and wonders of my saints. I would have made known the one who had possessed the kingdom of my will, which I hold so dear, so as to transmit it to others by imitating the one who had possessed it. Now, the saints of the Old Testament found themselves in the same condition as Adam. A divine repairer was missing who, while rejoining the human will and the divine, was to pay the debt of guilty man in a divine way. However, both the ancient saints and the modern ones have taken of my will as much as they have known. The very miracles they performed were particles of the power of my will communicated to them. So all my saints have lived, some in the shadow of my will, some in the reflections of its light, some submitted to its power, some to the order of its commands, because there is no sanctity without my will. But they have possessed of it the little they have known, no more, because only when a good is known does one then long for it and arrives at possessing it. No one can possess a good, a property, without knowing it. And suppose one did possess it without knowing it, that good is as though dead for him, because the life of knowledge is missing. Now, since my will is the greatest thing, which encompasses everything, and all things from the greatest to the smallest remain dissolved before it, so many things should be known about my will as to surpass what is known about creation, about redemption, about all virtues and all sciences. My will was to be a book for each step, for each act, a book for each created thing. The whole earth was to be filled with volumes of knowledges regarding the kingdom of my will, such as to surpass the number of created things. Now, where are these books? There is no book. Only a few sayings are known about it, while it should be at the origin of each knowledge of anything. Being the life of each thing, it should be on everything, like the image of the king impressed on the currency that circulates in a kingdom, like the light of the sun that shines over each plant to give it life, like water that quenches the thirst of burning lips, like food that satiates the hungry man after a long fast. Everything should be filled with the knowledges regarding my will. And if it is not so, it is a sign that the kingdom of my will is not known and therefore not possessed. Would you perhaps be able to tell me which saint said that he possessed this kingdom and the unity of the light of the supreme volition? Certainly not. I myself spoke little about it. Had I wanted to speak extensively about the kingdom of my will and about wanting to form it in man, just as innocent Adam possessed it, since this is the highest point, the most proximal to God, and the closest to the divine likeness, and since the fall of Adam was still fresh, they would all have become discouraged, and turning their backs to me would have said, if innocent Adam could not manage, nor had the constancy to live in the sanctity of this kingdom, so much so as to cause his own fall and that of all generations into miseries, into passions and irreparable evils, how can we guilty ones live in the kingdom so holy? Beautiful, yes, but we can say that it is not for us. Not only this, but since my will is the highest point, the ways, the means of transportation, the stairs, the decent clothes, the appropriate foods were needed in order to be able to dwell in this kingdom. So my coming upon earth served to form all this. Each one of my sayings, works, pains, prayers, examples, instituted sacraments, were ways that I formed, means of transportation to let them arrive more quickly, stairs to let them ascend. It can be said that I gave them the clothes of my humanity reddened with my blood to let them be clothed decently in this kingdom of my will. In creation, the uncreated wisdom established to give to man as inheritance. So even though I spoke little about this, because when I speak at time and circumstance, as the necessity and the utility of the good which my word contains must be enclosed in it. Instead of speaking, I did the deeds, intending to speak to you about the kingdom of my will. Now, how could they possess it if they did not have the knowledge of it? On the other hand, you must know that all the manifestations I've made to you about it, its prodigies, its goods, what the soul must do to be able to settle in this kingdom, my very express will for man to return into my kingdom, and how I have done everything, creation, redemption, so that he might come to possess my kingdom which he had lost, are bonds of transmission, are doors to let him enter, are donations that I make, are laws, instructions on how to live in it, intelligence to make them comprehend and appreciate the good they possess. If all this was missing, how could they possess this kingdom of my will? It would be as if someone wanted to go to live in another kingdom without a passport, without knowing either its laws or its customs or its dialect. Poor one, his entrance would be impossible. And if he did enter as an intruder, he would be so ill at ease that he himself would rather go out of a kingdom he knows nothing about. Now, my daughter, does it seem easier to you, more encouraging, more within the reach of the human nature, that after they had known the kingdom of redemption, in which the blind, the lame, and the sick can be healed, because the blind cannot enter the kingdom of my will, for in it all are straight and glowing with health, finding all possible means in the kingdom of redemption and the very passport of my passion and death, in order to pass into the kingdom of my will. Animated at the sight of such great good, they will decide to take possession of it. Therefore be attentive, and do not want to constrain or reduce the goods which are in the kingdom of my will. And you do this when you do not manifest everything of what I make known to you, because knowledge is the bearer of the gift. And if now I abound in the knowledges about it, it is gifts that I make. And in these gifts, I establish the more or the less to be placed in the kingdom of my will for the good of those who are to possess it. End of the reading. The 1st of July, 1927, volume 22. How in order to do a great work, great sacrifices are needed. My adorable Jesus, hides more and more. And even when I am writing, I no longer feel his light as I used to do almost until now, whispering to me the necessary words about what he wanted me to write. For one word alone that he had spoken to me in the little visit he would make to my soul, in the act of writing, he would whisper to me so many of them in my interior, to the point of making his most sweet voice resound on my lips, that I could not manage to write them all. And now everything is struggle, everything is strain, everything is poverty, poverty of light, of words, of the necessary terms. My poor eyes become filled with sleep, and I have to make incredible efforts to be able to write a few lines. And these efforts wear me out. They debilitate me so much that I cannot go on. Oh, how I miss he who was for me the light, word prompter, dictator, and would give me such vigil that my eyes would not be able to close for sleep, if not when my beloved Jesus would come to take me with him. So, given all this, after I'd written with incredible struggle, I was thinking to myself that maybe it is no longer will of God that when blessed Jesus tells me something, I should write on paper. And if he does not want it, neither do I want it. But while I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus came out from within my interior as though to sustain me, for I felt I was dying from the effort I had made in writing a little bit. And he told me, my daughter, the greater a work is and the more good it must bring to the human family, the many more heroic sacrifices are needed. How many sacrifices, pain, sorrows, and even death did I not suffer in order to form the work of Redeemer of creatures? Because the work was great, everything was to be great, sorrows, unheard of pains, the most infamous humiliations, invincible love, heroic strength, and unsurpassed patience. Everything was to be great, because when a work is great, creatures are taken from all sides so that they may receive the good that a great work contains within itself, except for some obstinate and perfidious one who wants to escape by force. On the other hand, when a work is small, great sacrifices are not required, and therefore with a small work, not all creatures can receive the good of it. In fact, since what is great is missing, some will not find the way. Some will lack the ground under their feet, some the light, and some will lack the enrapturing force of a sacrificed and sorrowful love. In sum, few will be those who will be able to receive the good of a small work because it lacks the life and the substance to be able to give itself to whoever wants to receive it. Now, my daughter, the work of the kingdom of the divine fiat is the greatest work. And while it holds hands with the work of redemption, because of the divine glory and the good and the sanctity it will bring to creatures, it surpasses the very redemption. This is why great sacrifices, innumerable pains and sorrows, incessant prayers are needed. Therefore, I had to choose a creature who voluntarily would accept the long sacrifice of many years, of many different pains, and I will make known to the children of my kingdom how much this kingdom of my will cost you and me, to make it so that all might enter into it, giving them open ways from all points and in all manners, so as to win them to come, ways of light, ways of pains, ways of all the manifestations and truths I have given. And I will show the incredible effort you made in writing, so that nothing might be missing, in order to let them find solid ground and safe ways to draw them with invincible force, and to let them take possession of the kingdom of the supreme fiat. When the human generations have known all the knowledges about the divine will, the great goods of my kingdom, and how the one who impetrated it suffered such long sacrifices, my knowledges and your sacrifices, United together we'll be powerful magnets, irresistible spurs, incessant calls, impenetrating light, deafening voices that, making them deaf to all other things, will leave them the hearing to listen to the sweet teachings of the divine fiat and to accept the kingdom that was impetrated for them with so many sacrifices. Therefore, in order to form a great work, there is much to do and to suffer. Everything is necessary. And what to you seems a pain of no significance, for others it may be a pitiful voice, such that moved by it, they will recognize themselves as too ungrateful not to accept a good so great that cost us so much because of them. Therefore, let me do, and leave me free to do what I want. End of the reading. There are no more readings today.